Hi, this is a quick video where I'm going to go over some of the specifics for generating an ambient occlusion render without rendering a specific pass, rendering pass. So here's my final. I put together a quick scene where I have on layer 1 I have my ambient occlusion layer, and on layer 2 I've got my color layer, and I'm going to show multiplying them together at a certain opacity. So let's take a look at the Maya file. So I'm just going to go over how to apply and render out the ambient occlusion pass. So what I'm going to do, what you would do is you would apply a surface shader to the entire scene. And inside that surface shader, in the out color, click the flag and apply an MIB ambient occlusion shader. And some of the important parameters that you will want to modify are the samples. The default is a little low, and you usually will get a grainy output. So start moving up until you get a very smooth ambient occlusion pass. However, the higher the number, the longer the render times. Also, the spread, depending on your screens, the size of your image and your resolution, the spread may need to be adjusted. In this case, when I was generating this scene, my first AO render was way too dark, and that was because my spread needed to be increased. I got some nice results here on the rocks, but underneath the spaceship I was getting too dark of a result. So I had a choice. I could sort of isolate the areas that I didn't like, and I could adjust them in Photoshop, and sort of change the contrast and the brightness. Go under adjustments and either change the black and white balance, or I could sort of go in and adjust the levels or the exposure. That also works quite a bit usually, or the brightness and contrast. So I would potentially reduce the contrast. Upping the contrast would get me darker darks. So that's a possibility. Or I can go in and do it in Maya and get it right and increase the spread. So I increased it to 2. And that gave me a pretty good result. So other things are in order to render correctly with a shader that has an MIB in front of it, you have to make sure that you are rendering with mental ray. So, and this works just fine. So we set the render, I output it, and then I'm opening this up in Photoshop, combining these two layers. I just cut and paste these two layers into one. And then I pasted the top layer as my AO layer, and I put a blend mode of multiply. I could also choose overlay. An overlay will keep the lights and will multiply the darks, and I think that in this case is giving me a better result for a couple of reasons. Some people will do multiply, and that will just keep the darks from the ambient occlusion scene. But in this case, using an overlay gives a bit more of a correct answer for a couple of reasons. One is around some of the areas that are incandescent, you wouldn't have an ambient occlusion area around them because you'd be having light kicking out from those. And so I think in this case it looks much better with an overlay. So we can play with compositing and blending that. Here it looks to me a little bit too bright. And then for the when I'm ready for the final output, I can flatten this image. So I can choose just to right click, and I can sort of flatten. Control E will blend down my layers. So here's it without the ambient occlusion pass and with the ambient occlusion pass. And it adds a subtle, important element of realism. You can also go to Layer, Flatten Image. So that's quickly, in a nutshell, how to generate an ambient occlusion pass in Maya. Thanks for watching.